Hello and welcome to a new video on cryptography for everybody. Today's video is the English translation of a talk I gave to school kids a few weeks ago. And I thought this may be also interesting for the viewers of this channel, so I translated it for you, recorded it now, and yeah, I hope you will enjoy it. In this video, we will discuss how secret message cracking works, and I will tell you some nice stories about how we decipher historical ciphers. What awaits us today in this video? I have 4 topics. The first topic is cryptology basics. In this topic, I will describe how basic cryptology works, and we will see how basic cipher cracking works. And then I have the crypto case 1. These are the Maximilian II ciphers. Maximilian II was a Holy Roman Emperor, and I deciphered a few years ago some texts that he wrote, or that a worker probably who worked for him wrote, and we will discuss this. Then we have crypto case 2, the Ramanacoil cipher, also an interesting cipher that I worked on with a Dutch colleague, and I will tell you the story about that cipher also. And then the last case I brought to you is the UCL Brougham cipher, crypto case 3. This is a cipher that was found in the UCL Brougham library. What exactly is a cipher? First of all, we need a plain text. For instance, hello Peter, shall we meet on Friday? And of course, we don't want others to know that we will meet Peter on Friday, so we need to encrypt this. To encrypt this, we need a cipher. An example for a cipher is the Caesar cipher. The Caesar cipher gets as input a secret key, so a cipher always has a secret key. In this case here it's 3, and the Caesar cipher just shifts letters in the alphabet by, for example, 3 places. And using a cipher, we produce a ciphertext. In this case it's KHOOR and so on. So only the receiver who knows which cipher was used and who's in possession of the same key can decrypt the encrypted message. Of course, this cipher here is really easy to solve even without the key, but we assume if we don't have the key, it's hard to decipher that. And it's so easy that you can pause this video now and try to decipher the message here on the left side. It has been decrypted also using the Caesar cipher, and below you can see the alphabet. Just pause the video and decipher it. Okay, I think this was really easy, and the decipherment of our ciphertext here is this is easy. Now let's have a look at when certain ciphers were developed in our history. First of all, the Caesar cipher, which shifts the alphabet, was developed by Gaius Julius Caesar approximately 2000 years ago. Then we have a new invention, not only shifting the alphabet, but scrambling the alphabet. That was approximately about 1200 years ago. On top of that, not only scrambling the alphabet, also other fantasy alphabets were invented, also for usage in ciphers. I have an example here on the left side. This was approximately 500 years ago. And then finally we have nomenclators with digits. A nomenclator cipher also assigns code words, as we will see, to certain words. And also this cipher here is homophonic. What does this mean? Each letter has different homophones that we can use for encryption. For instance, we can encrypt the A here with 01, 27 or 53. We can encrypt the B with 02, 28 or 54. So we have a choice. This of course makes a cipher more difficult for an attacker who has not the key to break, as we will see later. Here's an example of a nomenclator cipher. It's a French cipher from the 17th century, and in this French key we can find different categories. For instance, we have numbers for letters. So when we encrypt a text, we have here the choice for the letter A of 4, 235 and 7. For B we have 14, 225 and 17 and so on. But on top of that, we can also encrypt pairs of letters using numbers, and that makes it a nomenclator. We have a nomenclator table. These are numbers for individual words. And it's really difficult to find out what a nomenclator code means because they are so seldomly used in the text that, for instance, as we will see later, frequency analysis is more or less impossible with that. So it's very difficult to find out names that were encrypted using a nomenclator. Now let's have a look again at our different cipher types. And now it's interesting how many possibilities we have to create keys with these ciphers. With the shift cipher, we have only 26 keys when we use a Latin alphabet. And we have 26 because cryptologists also consider the non-shifted alphabet as a valid key, even that it does not encrypt anything. Then, with the scrambled alphabets and the fantasy alphabets, we have 403 quadrillion keys. That's 26 factorial. Using brute force, so testing every key, is not possible. And with the nomenclators, we have roughly about 4.7 centviginti septillion keys. That's a roughly estimation, so it's a very, very large number of possible keys. So now, when we think of how to break an encrypted text or how to break a cipher to decrypt such a text or decipher such a text, what could we do? Should we just give up because the numbers are too big? Clearly not, because there are tricks that we can use to break the ciphers. Let's have a look at these tricks. The first trick that we can use is letter frequencies. What does this mean? We have here an encrypted text. We can count the number of letters. You can see here, for instance, the I we have 13 times, the L we have 7 times, the P we have 5 times, and so on. And these letter frequencies here in the cipher text with a monoalphabetic substitution, so substituting or enciphering, encrypting each letter by the same letter, with this cipher type, the frequencies remain. And we know in English, for instance, that E is the most frequent letter. So we could use the I here. We could assume that the I here is the E in our plain text. So let's set it to E. And now we can have a look at the next most frequent letter. This is the L. And the next most frequent letter here is probably the T, because in English, the second most frequent letter is the T. And now we can go on with that game. We can have, for instance, a look at the M. This is not the most frequent letter in the text, but we can also see already here that, for instance, the word TME in English is with a very high chance the word the. So we change that to H. And we continue this game again, and we mark different letters and try maybe which kind of decrypted letters this could be. For instance, here the OK could be help, and the DC could be with. And we already can see in the last line we have letep, this could be letter. And I think you got the idea. You test an assumption by replacing the letters with the plaintext letters. And if it fits in several places well, then it's a high chance that we found the correct partially decryption. And we continue this until we decrypted the text. And despite having billions and millions of possibilities, we can use ladder frequencies to easily break an encrypted text or the cipher. And here now we have our second trick that we use, and that is the computer. Because not only can we do this, and we are as humans, we are quite slow, we can use a computer who does this for us. Why do we use a computer? You could ask yourself. We use a computer because it tests millions of keys per second. A human could not afford that. The computer uses intelligent searches, intelligent strategies like heuristics. So it doesn't search stupidly, it just takes advantages, for instance, also of frequency analysis. And today, of course, the computer learns with artificial intelligence. And lastly, the computer never gets tired. The computer will work hours and hours, and a human, after a few minutes or hours, cannot work anymore. The computer never gets tired. So how do you work professionally with historical ciphers, as I do in our research project? First of all, you establish an international research project, for instance, like the Descrypt or the old Decrypt project. You find different experts, for instance, linguists, computer science experts, historians, and so on, and you put them all into a research project. Then, in step 1, to break historical ciphers or to work professionally with historical ciphers, you need to find them. So the historians go to an archive and they search for encrypted material, for instance, like here in the Vatican, and then they bring you the encrypted texts. But before they can do that, they have to photograph documents also in the archives. So the historians take the documents as photos from the archives. What do they do with the photos? In step 3, they upload images of the documents in a cipher database for further processing. Then we can transcribe, the cryptologists can transcribe the encrypted text. Transcription means you take the images, you mark all the symbols, and you assign letters to them, like ABC and so on, that a computer can work with. You transfer from images to text files. That's a transcription. And then we can use the computer to analyze the text. Here is an example from CrypTool 2 that you probably know when you're a long-time viewer of this channel. CrypTool 2 is an open source e-learning tool for cryptography, but it can also be used to decipher historical ciphers, as you can see here. On the top, we have a digit cipher, and on the bottom, you can see a partial or mostly finished decryption. And the computer does this for us in a semi-automated way. We start the algorithm, it finds some letters, then we stop it. We mark, for instance, already correct letters and let it run again and again and again. And after a few minutes, hours, sometimes days, we find the decryption of a historical cipher. Then in step 6, we go back to our historians, and these analyze the historical content of the texts. Most of the time, or many times, these texts have not been read for hundreds of years, and now the historians can have a look at these and find out maybe interesting new insights of our history. And then in the last step, we publish the results, we go to magazines and write articles about what we found out. For instance, in the German CT, I write my articles, or in the research journal Cryptology. Now let's come to our cryptographic cases. The first case are the Maximilian II ciphers. You can see Maximilian II here on the left, and examples of his cipher texts on the right side. And the cipher texts we found in the Decode database in 2020. Our historian colleagues uploaded these before, and I was looking through our encrypted documents in our database, and I thought this cipher text looks really interesting, and so I started to work on it. They originally are from the HHSDA, that's the archive in Vienna containing, for instance, documents from the Habsburgs. Now let's have a look at the letters that we found. What do we have here? We have cryptic symbols on paper, and we have plain text words within the text written in Latin. You can see the interesting cryptic symbols on the left, and below that you see a word that's benigni. And in total we found 3 letters with a total of 18 pages of encrypted text. At the beginning, I only had no idea who wrote the letters. I had no idea what language was being used, and my analysis software CrypTool 2, of course, which I used to analyze the letters. How does this look like? We have here the software you already saw before. I put the transcribed ciphertext into the software and started to working on the cipher. First of all, I tried French and I tried Latin because these languages were used in the court at that time. Also, the dating of the archive was wrong. They dated it to the 18th century, what was completely wrong. We didn't know at that time. And so I tried German at one point. And when I tried German, as you can see here below, you have valid German texts, and you can see at the beginning here Maximilian. And we were really happy to be able to read the plain text after solving the cipher. My colleague Michel Waldispühl then assisted me and joined our project working on the Maximilian ciphers, and she identified Emperor Maximilian II. It was her idea that Maximilian II could be the author of the letters, and she also identified together with me the transmission date, and this was 1575, so not in the 18th century. That was really interesting. How did we find out that? Let's have a look at the beginning and the end of the ciphertext. At the beginning you can see all these letters in one line, or these symbols, and you see all these hashes here, and we mark with a hash all symbols that are nulls. What is a null? A null is a symbol that has no meaning. It's just there to confuse a cryptanalyst. And at the beginning it was hard because we of course didn't know that these were nulls, but after identifying the nulls we could read M-A-X-I-M-I-L-I-A-N, Maximilian. And then, after some days and weeks of analyzing the remaining parts and still not being able to know where or when it was written, Michel saw a 1, a 5, a 7 and a 1 also in a lot of nulls at the end of the text. So the date was written, not even encrypted, it was written in clear, but we didn't see it first. But when you see it, you cannot unsee it. So the letter was written in 1575. So what is the story behind these letters that we found? In that time, when it had been written, the throne of Poland, Lithuania in 1575 was empty. The king fled. He preferred to be French king because his brother, the former French king, died, so he went away and there was an empty throne in Poland, Lithuania. This is Poland, Lithuania in 1618. I found a map that's a little later, but basically it had the same size already in 1575. So a really large country, including Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, parts of Russia, Latvia, Estonia, and so on. A really, really big country. And the interesting thing is that they, to get a new king, they did a Sejm. A Sejm is an election where the nobility elect the king. So it was some kind of the first, or one of the first modern democracies. And it was called the free election of 1575. The Poland-Lithuanian nobleman needed a new king. And Maximilian, of course, wanted to become king. He was a Habsburg emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor. but still having another country would be interesting for the Habsburgs, so he wanted to become king and he attended that. And he had opponents. The opponents were the Princess Anna and the Prince Stephen. And Anna was basically the one who wanted to become king or queen, but since she was not allowed to become this on her own, she needed a husband, so she and Stephen together wanted to become king and queen. So, what is in Maximilian's letters? Maximilian's goals were to secure the crown for the Habsburgs. Of course, money, countries, or new country is very interesting for him. And he also wants to have direct influence on the election. So he writes to his envoys to, basically manipulate the voting. And he wanted to build up pressure, even to go to war if he does not get the crown. That was all written in these letters, basically. Yeah, and how did it end? We have the emperor, we have the prince and the princess. And now what do you think? Who became the king of Poland, Lithuania? Of course, Stephen and Anna. Basically, the noblemen voted for all three, but Maximilian was too slow. Stephen and Anna were the first to receive the crown, and Maximilian was really unhappy about it. He even went to war, but even if he would have got the crown, he had not much time to enjoy it, because only, that's not here, that's only a year later he died, unexpectedly. Let's come to the second case, the Ramanacoil cipher, which is a case from the Dutch East India Company. What is the Ramanacoil cipher? The Ramanacoil cipher is a very beautiful encrypted document, as you can see here, and it was found in the decode database by me. So not really found. A colleague from the Netherlands asked me if we can work on it together. And its origin is the National Archives in The Hague. And the interesting thing is, as you can see here, the key was included, so we did not need cryptanalysis to decrypt it. We could just type in the key and decipher the text. As you can see here, it consists of astrological and astronomical symbols. It has special symbols for Ramanacoil, which is today's Ramasvaram. We have Ceylon, a special symbol for Ceylon, that is today's Sri Lanka. And we have a special symbol for Ireland. And we have symbols in our key for double letters like EE, FF, LL, and OO, which are common double letters in the Dutch language. The letter is 46 pages long, so you could say it's a book, it's not even a letter, so very long. Very much ciphertext. At the beginning, I had both the ciphertext and the key, what is really nice when you want to decrypt an encrypted document, an encrypted historical document. We have the information that the plaintext was in Dutch because it was found in the Netherlands. And of course, again, I had my analysis software, CrypTool 2, which I used to analyze the letter. And I didn't even need to cryptanalyze it. I could just enter the ciphertext you can see on the top left. Then in the middle, I entered the key. And on the right side, you can see the Dutch decryption. And below, I even tried to use our analysis tool. Despite having the key, I just wanted to find out, does it also work? And yes, the analysis tool could also solve the cipher without the key. My colleague Jorgen Dinesen is helping me with the decryption. He asked me to work on that because he was interested in the plaintext and is researching the history of the cipher. He's the expert behind the cipher, or the history of the cipher, and he conducts an analysis, or we conducted an analysis of the cipher with me. And we come to the conclusion that the encryptor had little knowledge of cryptography, so it was very poorly encrypted. What is the background of the cipher? We have to go to the 17th century and we have to look at the United East India trading company, the VOC. Very, very big company of its time, the largest company of its time. Basically comparable to today's companies like Amazon, Apple, or Google, so really big players of their time. We have our protagonist, Wycliffe van Hoons, who was governor of Ceylon in 1674. Ceylon is now Sri Lanka. It's an island that you find near India. It's marked red on the globe on the right side. Wycliffe van Hoons was interested in conquering bigger parts of Ceylon. He wanted to conquer parts of India, and to do so he needed to send a message to the Netherlands. And to send a message he had his private secretary Loewensen and an escort soldier that he sent to an 8,400 kilometers long journey through half of the world. As you can see here on the right side, they started in Ceylon, then they went by ship, then they had to cross the desert, went by ship through the Mediterranean Ocean, landed in Italy, and then traveled the way to Amsterdam to bring the letter that I showed you at the beginning of this part here. And what did he ask what had he to ask the leaders of the VOC, of the East India Company? He had to ask for his boss, Van Hoons, for soldiers and for support. Now we can ask ourselves, why didn't he just use a ship around Africa? That is because England and France were fighting against the Netherlands, and it was too risky for Van Hoons to send the letter around Africa. That's why they had to take here the Loewensen, the secretary, and the soldier, this route that was very long. They needed a total of more or less a year to travel all this way to Amsterdam. In Amsterdam then, Loewensen presented the decrypted message. He had the key in his head. He decrypted all the pages to the supervisory of the VOC, the so-called Lords 17. And he asked for all that his boss wanted, to go to war, to bring soldiers and so on. But what was the answer? The answer was a clear no. And of course, Loewensen was not very happy about that after 1 year walking through the desert and so on. Why didn't they get the soldiers and the support? The orientation of the VOC changed. They changed their strategies, and they didn't want to conquer more land. They said no because of that. So Van Hoons never could receive or achieve his goals. And now to the third case, the UCL Brougham cipher. Really interesting third case. I have to tell a short story about that. I was working as every day on probably some cryptography, and then I found on Facebook in a break someone wrote on Facebook that on X, at that time it was Twitter, the UCL Special Collections library posted a ciphertext, as you can see on the left side. Attention, code-breaking enthusiasts, we found a letter written in code in the uncatalogued portion of our Brougham archive. If you recognize the code used, please let us know. And of course, I was hooked. I saw this text and it looked really interesting. So I copied these 4 images here and started a transcription. I instantly was eager to be the first one to decrypt it. And I type up the first few pages, so I create a transcription. And I use my software, CrypTool 2, to analyze the letter and at least the parts that were available on Twitter X. And I managed to decipher it, I will show you that. And I realized that there are not all pages on X. So I asked Katie Macon, the archivist who found the letters, or the pages, to give me more. And she gives me all 16 pages of the letter. Unfortunately, the end is missing. It was destroyed. She couldn't find it in the archive. It was lost. But all the people in that text are hidden behind code names, as I will show you. And only a single name appears uncoded. How does this? Who are the people that we don't know in these letters? So we had people like Dickie and Dick and so on. So alliterations. The people we don't know in this cipher were probably Jacobites who wanted to reinstate the deposed Stuart King James II as King of England. This is an assumption we cannot prove, but the chances are really high. And incidentally, Henry Brougham, whose archive contains the letter, lived 100 years after the letter was written, so the letter was not written by himself, but probably by someone who was one of his ancestors. Who is the only person now mentioned in the letter by name? The person was no other than Jean-Agnès Berthollet de Pleineuf, or as she was called, Madame de Prie. She was a mistress of French Prime Minister Louis IV, Henri de Bourbon, and she controlled him basically completely. She was to be won over their cause, so they wanted to bribe her with money so that she supports their Jacobite ideas to reinstate the king. But how did it end? It ended tragically. She died in 1727 in exile, probably never supported them, and the king was no king again. He never became King of England again. So all the stories I showed you today are more or less tragic, and that's what I love with cryptography, with historical cryptography, the stories behind the ciphertexts. And when you're the first one to reveal these, the plain text, this is really amazing. Yeah, and this is all I have for you today. We have learned a little about cryptography and cryptanalysis. We learned about 3 interesting historical encryption methods and ciphers. I showed you some interesting ciphers of my work. And now, if there are any questions or comments about my work, about solving historical ciphers, please write these as a comment below the video. Also, please tell me what was the most interesting story that I showed you. Yeah, and thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video.